Thanks so much for your patience as we were waiting for that last main session to finish. But it's a pleasure to start this poster session now, and I've lined Schmidt up to start first.
Thank you, Sophus. Thank you so much. So it's my pleasure to be here as a part of this poster session. I'm an environmental planner and a geographer currently based in India. I'm going to start my master's in natural resource management at the University of Twente in the coming August. And the topic that I'm currently presenting is actually an independent research that I'm also trying to develop into a PhD proposal for the later. So this topic I actually started as a continuation of my bachelor's thesis, which was on a phenomenological perspective to understand human nature relationships. And at the same time, I was reading a book by David Bohm in which he signifies and elaborates on the importance of language in determining the perception and the experience. So I was quite curious on understanding how the experiences of humans in tribal and indigenous communities who are inhabiting the forest, they differ from the urban communities. So that's how I started this project. And I went to Gir Forest, which are situated in the southwestern part of India, where there are pastoral communities inhabiting the forest. And I stayed with them for a week at the first, and I continued visiting them to understand various facets of their life and how they are connected with the forest landscape. So the method that I choose for the study was primarily ethnographic in nature. So I used audiovisual documentation as well as semi-structured interviews to understand how they are connected with the landscape. And based on the data that was collected, I tried to derive a visual framework in which I divided uh, various aspects of their life and how they are interconnected. So if you see the visual framework, which is on the right-hand side of my poster, this is what I eventually developed. In this, you can see there are various aspects of their life. For example, habitation and dwelling, how is the research and technology in the way they inhabit the forest, how is their economy, which is basically pastoralism, so it's dairy products and dairy farming, and geography and environment, and also the political aspects of their existence. So after dividing this after categorizing their way of life in this 6 main categories, I further delved into how they are further differentiated, and after determining them, I and visualizing and also analyzing the interviews, I came up with how they are interconnected. And I was quite surprised to see that almost everything in their life was interconnected somehow with other aspects of their life. So I came up with inference that the degree of wholeness in their experience is in a way proportional to this interconnectedness that they experience. And based on the figure, there were some key aspects of their life that I realized. So the first was spatial proxemics. By this I mean how they inhabit the forest and what are the degrees of spatial proximity. For example, they also cohabit the forest with different predators like lions and leopards. So there's a very delicate distance and physical proximity negotiation that takes place, and one of the key factors that contributes to this is their sensory awareness and the way they can smell and visualize different elements of nature, which urban communities are not capable of because they don't dwell in the forest. Second aspect was biosemiotics. This refers to mainly the way they communicate with the cattle when they go for herding in the forest. So they have developed this technique to sing in which, while singing, they establish an auditory space. So this helps the cow in determining cows and the kettles in determining the distance up to which they can graze. When they don't hear them singing, it means that they are crossing the boundaries. So this helps in protecting them from the attacks of the predators. And the last one was they have developed a very refined ethnobotanical practices in which they have indigenous knowledge of the medicinal plants, which helps them in maintaining their own health as well as the health of the cattle. So to conclude, I realized that this degree of wholeness, when compared with the urban counterparts, it was quite different. For example, in the urban areas, the livelihoods are not connected to the landscape. The food that we eat are not connected to the landscape. The dwelling and the form of the buildings are also not connected to the landscape because we are. I'm living in urban area. That's what I'm referring to. It's determined a lot by the technology. And also the way we understand nature in urban areas is also in a way colonized. For example, we have indoor plants, and I see it as a form of colonization because the plant does not exist within a broader natural ecosystem. It's just potted. It's like a cage. So from this research, it was inferred that the lesser the interconnections, the lesser the degree of the experienced wholeness. And I'm trying to carry forward this framework that I developed to understand also the degree of sustainability and the ecological footprint and also the resource consumption. So yeah, that's it.
Thanks so much, Schmidt. Does
Thank
anybody
you.
have a question? Perfect. So I do. And it was how did you choose your methods, Schmidt?
I was trying to understand their lived experience. So one of the main method to choose lived experience and phenomenology is participant observation. So that's why I came up with the ethnographic approach. And after that, based on the interviews, I realized that in some way I had to draw the interconnections between various aspects of their life. So I tried to first formulate it in a linear way, and then I realized that it was if I mold it into a circular form, then the interconnections between the various aspects of life there would be more lucid, and it would be more easy to uh, understand it. Yeah.
Wonderful. Okay, thank you so much. We're
Thank
going to
you.
move on to the next speaker now, and then we will we'll welcome you back in for the discussion afterwards. So
Thank you.
our second speaker is going to be Anna.
Good afternoon. My name is Anna Steltenkamp. I tend to ask many questions, and so I begin by posing a few to you now. How do we as humans reroute ourselves into our social and ecological communities, becoming actively engaged participants in our local living systems? How do we participate in reciprocal homemaking with both our human and more than human neighbors? How do we learn from the many solutionists, wisdom keepers, and stewards that care for our places so that we may grow into these roles ourselves and embrace the embedded possibilities, responsibilities, and opportunities? Humanity faces many layering crises, including one of worsening disconnection and distraction as we turn away from our tangible realities to tune further into our digital presences. Many are overwhelmed with loneliness, and this extends to our relationship with other species. As Robin Wall Kimmerer states, the people of the modern world suffer a great sadness, a species loneliness, and estrangement. This experience worsens the feelings of helplessness, anxiety, and despair that are growing widespread, especially amongst youth, whose generation is now the loneliest cohort in our human population. Yet, as Linda Hogan beautifully articulates, amidst this emergency, there is a possible act of emergence. It's an invitation for resilience and restoration, creativity and co-creation through a radical reimagining of what it means for our communities to collectively tend to our natural places and become living expressions of our ecosystems. There are blossoming possibilities through nature-based solutions to weave in this invitation for collaborative stewardship, to lay out a pathway toward what I refer to as radical re-inhabitation. This shared invitation to activate personal agency and practice biocultural restoration enhances feelings of care, purpose, and belonging for those who participate because they develop a more relational sense of place and tangible sense of impact. Yet, how is this done in a manner that promotes a thriving community that welcomes engagement from its diversity of inhabitants and prioritizes the wisdom drawn from varied generations, traditions, literacies, and life ways? I propose a few central tenets for radical re-inhabitation that I consider to be both guiding principles and evolving practices, each complementary in nature to the others. They are redefining expertise, participatory futures, and humble attunement. I will offer a grounding description for each, yet I invite you to reflect on what they mean to you. I've come to know redefining expertise to mean working through embodied multisensory and emotional literacies. Karen Ingersoll defines this concept well when she writes of a corporal literacy that becomes a logic that remembers through performance. She suggests that both the cognition of the mind and the movement of the body are necessary, working together, that emotion and logic are both ways of knowing. This framing changes not only what is expertise, but also who is an expert. What might we discover if we listen to those amongst us who can echo the teachings they have learned from a place of care and concern, purpose and passion, relation and reciprocity with the natural world? In a conversation with Janet McGillivray, she told me to imagine if everyone on the planet understood that they have an expertise just by simply breathing the air and drinking the water. Now, participatory futures refers to crafting shared visions through collaborative exploring and cooperative designing of what possible futures may be. This process for imagining a resilient and renewed future, a future we desire, necessitates intergenerational and intersectional collaborations. Why? Because it is not only the crises that are layered and interwoven, the solutions are as well. Let us appreciate the continuity of this work, a collage across time and space, identity and discipline. Finally, humble attunement asks us to discover ways to forge for rather than forge the layered stories in our landscapes and seascapes. It requests us to lean into our shared presence. What wisdom does the natural world offer us when we embrace our student role, quieting our own human cleverness to pay deeper attention to those around us? How might we learn to step into natural places with a perspective of respect and awe for the wisdom libraries and innovation repositories that reside around us? Let us dare to ask questions before we prescribe answers. Why? Because there lies an ecology of wisdom that may guide us, lessons by teachers who have evolved and thrived, struggled and adapted on Earth far longer than us humans. As Oren Lyons has stated, we forget and we consider ourselves superior, but we are, after all, a mere part and parcel of this creation. We stand somewhere between the mountain and the ant. Thank you.
That was lovely. Thank you. We have a brief moment for questions, if there are any questions. And so my question, Anna, is how does your research try and implement this kind of vision in practice? Are you doing participatory research with people in communities to try and define how to operationalize this, or how does it work?
Yeah, so I'll give one example. So I'm based in Seattle, Washington, and within Seattle is a really great initiative called the Green Seattle Partnership. And they are a collection of private and public bodies working on ecosystem restoration, food sovereignty, climate action, different practices within Seattle. And they have a forest steward, an urban forestry training program that I would say is a really interesting example of this being implemented as community members without grounding in ecology or a degree as an ecological restoration practitioner can go through a training practice. And once they do, they actually get to adopt a block and become the steward of that local area within their city and guide others through community stewardship and volunteer activities. So I would say that's a really great example of taking community members, giving them the training and the opportunities to learn from those who do hold the expertise, and then giving them that space and opportunity to put into practice and guide their neighbors and friends and community members to do the same.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Okay, super. Penny, you are up next.
So hello everyone, thank you for this opportunity. So I'm Penny, a PhD student from IPB University in Bogor, Indonesia. And today I will share my study on local community knowledge, gaps, and aspiration related to the mangrove ecosystem in Demak and Jepara district in Indonesia. So the study aimed to investigate the knowledge, perception, and also the utilization and dependency of coastal community in Demak and Jepara district on mangrove ecosystem. So this study was conducted in 19 villages in Demak and Jepara district, and then both districts are coastal areas in the northern coast of Java Island, Indonesia. So mangrove in this area are declining due to land use change, and then this pushes the coastline inwards. And then this area also experience frequent rising water level and also sinking land. And then we survey around 1,000 households with an even split of gender, so 500 male and then 500 females. And then all respondents are adult, and the status is a household head. And then the data was collected through one-on-one interview and then using a questionnaire. And then we are using a systematic sampling design. The data collection is on last year, September until October 2023, and we use a descriptive statistic for the analysis. So as for the results, so first I would like to apologize for the small graph. So I think I put too much on the poster. So the first one is basically about the socioeconomic condition of the respondent. And then it revealed an education gap, especially for female respondent, especially in the Demak district, where the area is, let's say, in a worse condition comparing to Jepara district. Female, they have a lower education level comparing to the male counterpart. And then this probably because women are perceived or mainly responsible for domestic job. And then thus education is not a priority for them. And then both genders, they are heavily rely on fishing and then informal activities for their livelihood, which indicating a strong dependency on natural resources, especially mangrove ecosystem in this area. And then I will move to the second graph. So the second graph is showing the respondent knowledge about ecosystem services. So most of the respondents, both female and then male, they are aware of the 4 types of ecosystem services of the mangrove. So such as provisioning services like providing food and also raw materials, and then regulating services such as food control, and then also like for water purification and then cultural. So they use it for recreational activities and also tourism. And the last one is for supporting services. So they understand that mangrove ecosystem has a function for habitat for fish, crabs, and other species. And then males, they generally have a higher knowledge level comparing to female. And this is probably because during awareness activities, it's likely more are often invited than the female respondent. And despite they have like a higher knowledge on those ecosystem services, there is still a gap in awareness about, like specific function of mangrove for the people. And then I will move to the last graph, and this is about the training capacity building or the training needs. So this is one of the main aim of our study. So female respondent received less training comparing to male respondent. And then if we compare 2 districts, people in or respondent in Demak receive more training than in Jepara. This is probably because like Demak is one of like the center of mangrove rehabilitation program in Indonesia. So they receive more training or activities related to mangrove habitation. And then in conclusion, so the respondent identify like what they want from the training. So what they want from the capacity building is non-timber forest product training, such as food processing or creating like a natural dye from mangrove for batik. So batik is like a traditional cloth in Indonesia. And then they also would like to have like entrepreneurship training and then fish processing training. The women also interested in understanding more about the mangrove planting and rehabilitation because it's mainly men who are involved in those training and also for tourism skill. And then this finding also suggests that tailored training initiative is really important and it needs to integrate with resource management and also community outreach. And then I think one of the last messages is that it is important to ask people what they need rather than imposing training or activities on them. Thank you.
That was wonderful. Thank you. I'd like to invite questions. Penny, I have a few. I think this was really interesting and great. One is actually just a huge respect for your survey sample size there. That I know how hard getting household survey data is, and that is an amazing amount of effort that's gone into your sample. Really great. So was that you working alone or with a team of researchers?
So yeah, we are working together with like university students. So I'm also working so I'm working as a consultant for a small NGO in Indonesia. So we work collaboratively with local university in Central Java, and then we provide training on the ethical on ethical review and then how to conduct like interview, and then we're going together to the field. I mean to conduct the interview. So in total, there are 8 university students who I work with.
Yeah,
So
wonderful.
it's part of like
Big
collaborative
project
process.
management job as well. Really cool. And my second major question then is, you've uncovered, I think, very interesting disparities between both what male and female participants want from their training and what their knowledge gaps are. Do you think they're generalizable, that we can design specific training for men and for women that is based on this research? Or do you think the way to do it is to go into a community and interview people, ask them what they want? So it has to be done at the village or jurisdictional scale rather than you're able to make generalizations. What does the data say about that?
So I think so the data basically say, I mean, like women and then male, they have like women and then men, they have like different preferences on the training. And then sometimes like when the government or for example, like an NGO come and then provide the training, it's not, like it's not suitable with what they want. And then most of the training is trying to make like the women doing a productive or money generating activities without looking back that women already have so many things to do in their household. And then it's imposed more burden to them. And then usually, I mean, like this type of training is not asking also the men to support women. For example, like if they want the women to do productive activities, so they also need to seek like the support from the men, to kind of like reduce the burden of the women while they're conducting these activities. So I think one of the recommendation is it is important to go back with the community if you already have, some of like suggestion and then see whether how they think about it and then discuss it with them first prior to implement your program or your activity.
Wonderful. Okay. Thanks so much, Penny. Okay, so it's Manisha next.
My poster explores how indigenous home gardening and farming practices of tribal communities in a protected area in Simlipal Biosphere Reserve, which is located in eastern part of India. So how their home gardening and farming practices enhance climate change resilience and sustainable livelihoods in considering the changing contexts in the biosphere reserve. So in a biosphere reserve, the goal of balancing conservation efforts with sustainable development often conflicts with the livelihoods in the region of the region's inhabitants, the tribal households, and climate change exacerbates all the vulnerabilities that are already inherent within the socio-ecological system. So in India's Simlipal Biosphere Reserve, tribal communities face land displacement, deforestation, wildlife conflicts, and also an expanding population, which threatens their forest and farm-based livelihoods and the environment also. Climate change and extreme events further increase these livelihood risks for indigenous populations who live here. Now, interestingly, the proximity of people to natural ecosystems within a biosphere reserve for their livelihoods, this facilitates a deeper understanding of ecological dynamics and promotes practices that can simultaneously support conservation and enhance resilience as well. To scrutinize the pathways in home gardens that act as nature-based solutions and help the tribals to autonomously adapt to the changing contexts in the protected area, I employed a hybrid approach. This approach combines the socio-ecological systems framework, the sustainable livelihoods framework, and the sustainable development goals framework. I conducted 36 focus group discussions across 36 villages in the outdoor daytime environments in the Biosphere Reserve to gather insights and data. Home gardens in Simlipal Biosphere Reserve were observed to be highly multifunctional, integrating native forest species, bamboo species, wild foods, and timber species, multi-crop cultivation, tuber crops, root and tuber crops, and crops that are grown on the like the thatches of the houses, the roofs of the houses, and also domesticated livestock. And these home gardens these land patches are within small land areas. Diversification is the hallmark of the home gardening practices in Simlipal Biosphere Reserve. So for example, when indigenous men, they migrate for work to other cities or outside of the biosphere reserve, women step in, children step in to manage the garden labor. It ensures continuity and also avoidance of labor hiring efforts or costs. So there is fluidity is designed and inherent in the home gardening practices. Fluidity to switch between various timings of work in the home garden, crop types that are grown, to switch between the conservation or cultivation motives, harvesting frequency, to make decisions for retaining the home garden produce for subsistence or selling them for an additional income. So while seemingly simple, these pathways are of strategic diversification that align with and adapt to the local context that vary circumstantially in the biosphere reserve. The vulnerability of tribal communities to secure livelihoods is accentuated by unequal distribution, access, and control of vital resources within the biosphere, such as land, water, and forests. Practices such as diverting surplus produce to sale or gifted labor hours by the neighbors in exchange of home garden produce, utilizing livestock and plant wastes as nutrients, are some of the examples that I like to share that portray active exchange of livelihood assets, making up for the deficient one, adapting to the local contexts. Home gardening practices are a cornerstone of nature-based solutions, and they reflect a strategic alignment of resource-efficient, low-cost decisions with the economic realities in ground of the tribal socio-ecological systems. So to conclude, as I had already, I like to reiterate that home gardens, diversity is a hallmark of these tribal home gardens. And while these successful practices can easily be lost due to the penetration of influence of the external factors and sometimes the government policies, which do not really consider all these practices. And therefore, collaborations between identification of these practices and active collaborations with the indigenous people to acknowledge their practices, incentivize them, and to scale them up is the need of the hour. And also this also helps to shift the perception of indigenous people from at-risk communities to active stewards of environmental conservation and the current climate challenges. Thank you so much.
That's wonderful. Thank you. I'd like to invite any questions. Manisha, again, I'm admiring your sample size here. 36 focus groups is some serious work. Really, really amazing. One of the things I'd like to follow up on is this is very interesting to me, right? The idea that the home gardening practices that are occurring in these communities are a kind of climate adaptation. They are diversified. There's results, diversification means in years that are experiencing extreme environmental conditions, if one crop fails, another maybe it doesn't. That's the nature of diversification. So I find that very interesting. So what do you think we can do to support this? It sounds like lots of these practices are already held and widespread within these communities. So what is the role of the external capacity builder here?
I think that these practices are seemingly very plain to the external agencies sometimes. Not always they are appreciated in a way or scaled up in a way they should be. So maybe that is a point where we can start. Second point is, in a biosphere reserve, especially in the Indian context, there are already multiple schemes of different departments of the government, but then those schemes are somewhere overlapping, and they have the ability to cater to some of the existing practices to uphold the conservation practices in the home garden. So I think convergence of those schemes are really essential.
That's wonderful. So do you mind giving a little bit example so I can have just a more tangible sense of the kind of conflicting schemes that are going on that might affect one household?
There are no conflict. Okay. So one conflicting, what can be conflicting is that sometimes the indigenous tribals, they are given, maybe they're encouraged for plantations. They're encouraged to take up plantations in their in their home gardens, which is diluting the multifunctionality of their spaces. So that is one way I look at it.
This is very interesting. I want to pick up on this later. So the idea is plantations might be good for efficiency, but they might not be very resilient to climate change, where diversification might bring resilience, but it might not bring efficiency. So there's a very interesting, I think, debate about potential tensions between efficiency and resilience. Okay, that was wonderful. Thank you so much. And we're going to move on now to the final talk by Jeff Francis.
I'm going to talk about my thesis research from a master in environmental economics and climate change. I'm from Dominican Republic, and my thesis focuses on NbS project sustainabilities, aiming to generate knowledge and ideas on how to define or identify indicators for monitoring these social benefits that are so subjective, and we don't know how to measure these indicators that most of them are based on people's perspectives. And so in this regard, we developed a handbook to obtain the social feasibility index based on previous frameworks and handbooks for design and implementation of NbS initiatives created by the Society for Ecological Restoration, the SER, and the International Union for Conservation of Nature, the IUCN, and Friends of Ecosystem-Based Adaptation. So our proposal assesses the social feasibility of mangrove restoration interventions for public, private, and interested organizations, which could be adapted to projects in other ecosystems. So implementing NbS, as we have talked throughout this conference in these days, requires long-term investments and the consideration of local conditions to ensure the success and the sustainability of interventions. So assessing social feasibility prior to interventions allows project managers to design strategies to address social challenges and enhance stakeholder participation. And how we did that. We estimated this social feasibility index for mangrove restoration interventions in a study area that was we validated in Montecristi, a community in Dominican Republic, a rural community. And we assess a set of qualitative parameters following 7 steps. For this research, we consider qualitative parameters, principal criteria and indicators. Some authors refer to them criteria or indicators, just like that. And these are tools for multi-criteria decision-making considering multiple factors. This proposal considers PCI, the principal criteria indicators, as an standard with a hierarchical structure of parameters used to assess and understand diverse situations with specific aim within a defined space and time to identify trends and patterns affecting the sustainability of NbS projects. So because of time, we don't have a lot of time. I'm just going to mention these 7 steps we proposed. And first, we identified the validation area. Second, we elaborated a work plan and budget. And third, we mapped key organizations in mangrove restoration processes in the validation area. And also, as I mentioned, this could be applied in other ecosystem. It will depend on this ecosystem. For this research we mapped the organizations in restoration processes in this validation area, and we defined them by sectors: private, public, and civil society, and their role and influence in a scale from 1 to 5, where 1 is low and 5 is high. And step 4, we created a draft for the PCI standard to estimate the social feasibility index. And we elaborated a table per indicator with the required information and parameters to estimate them, and establish a Likert scale per indicator. And the 5th step, we collected the data. Sorry, I want to mention that we developed 4 principles disaggregated and 9 criteria and 20 indicators to get this social feasibility index that is this hierarchical structure I mentioned. In the step 5, we collected the data to validate these matrix or tables developed in the step 3 and 4. The key organization actors is identified in the literature and reports from national and local institutions, and the PCI standard. And how we validated through a participatory process, including 39 semi-structured interviews with individuals from these key organizations and 2 group interviews with women and youth from the community. The sample is not too big because we just want to demonstrate that this proposal is functional and we can get the social feasibility index. In step 6, we estimated the social feasibility index and how. Since our indicators are qualitative and the majority of the most indicators are based on people's perspective, we cannot use mean. So we selected the most frequent value among the indicators for each criteria and so on. So this index is the most frequent value and for the principles. In the step 6, in the step 7, we communicate the level of the social feasibility to the competent authorities. I want to point out that This tool, using multi-criteria methodology, not only identify trends and patterns affecting NbS project sustainability, also provides practical recommendations for informed decision-making, improving governance and coordination, as could be determined to ensure the long-term success. That's all, and thank you.
That is wonderful. And I can't believe that was your first presentation in English. That was perfect. Really, really great. Yeah, thank you so much. I'd welcome any questions. Again, I have many. The first thing is you say your sample size is not very big. That's not true at all, right? 39 semi-structured interviews. I've just been working my butt off on a postdoc project, and I've been doing it for 2 years, and I've got 25, right? So 39, I'm very jealous, okay? That's seriously good. My question is, I didn't fully understand your description of taking the modal value for the social feasibility index. So do you mind recounting who it is that's filling out these Likert scales for all of the individual indicators? So is it you as the project evaluator, or is that a group from the local community who is filling out these Likert scales? How does that survey process happen?
Yeah, in the tables per indicator, we define and for example, it's like, and we made each question like an yes or no, and people don't respond to this, and we can get a numerical we can get a number to get the mode. For example, did you we ask people, did you your parents or your grandfathers teach you something, or what they told you about mangrove, what they did with that? They constructed houses, or they make dinner, or what they do for with mangrove. And they start to talk, and we delimitate, like if they mention yes in some point of the responses, we are considering this like an yes. And this, with all the interviews, gave us a number for each indicator. And we evaluated in the scale, like Likert scale, we have like if from 0 to 20% of people responded yes, and is 1. If from 20 to 40% of people responds yes, is second, is 2 in the scale 2. So we did that for each indicator and group by criteria. The first principle has 2 criteria, and each criteria has 6 indicators. So this gave us, for example, the 6 indicators, which number is most frequent, or which number repeat more. And we have a number, for example, it's 3. And we repeat this for the criteria that groups the principle, and the final we got the principle. And we did that for by sector too. For example, we tried since the start, we did this work. We separate by sector all the questions. For example, we interview 1 people from public sector, and we try to always identify the answers, and at the end we can estimate this index per sector and get and provide recommendations to them by sectors.
Wonderful, thank you. Okay, so this is when the session was scheduled to end, but we obviously started very late. I just want to check in with everybody. Are you able to stay on for another 5-10 minutes to get the full session? Yeah?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. So the first thing I would like to do is we have a really nice team of global expertise here. I just want to check if there's anyone that would like to raise any questions or ask any questions to anybody else in the group that can help them with their research. Very good. So there's two main themes that I see that link a bunch of these presentations together, and I really want to get your thoughts on these things. So my first kind of general question, and this is for Anna and Schmidt, is once we understand a community's relationship with its environment, what does that teach us that we can then operationalize to develop people's relationship and connection with nature, right? So you're working in a specific case study site, be it a forest in India or be it a community in Seattle, and you as a researcher are learning to understand the connections between the people and their environment. So say you've mapped it out. You've mapped out the connections between people and their environment. What can we do with that information that can help us achieve good environmental outcomes? How do you see it being a useful input into a process that then delivers good environmental or ecological outcomes? So I'd invite Anna or Schmidt to reflect on that and to discuss that.
I think a big part of my presentation is speaking not just to how we understand these relationships for communities outside of our own, but rather also how do we turn that in on ourselves. So I suppose a part of my answer is a bit of a reframing of your question, that not just thinking about how as researchers or academics that we're going into communities that are not our own and learning about those relationships, but oftentimes do we have those relationships? Do we have that knowledge with our own communities, or have we cultivated those relationships for ourselves? So I would say that's a part of my answer. When it is collaborating or working with other communities, I think as the participatory futures comes into play and this idea of humble attunement, the asking questions and discovering and asking what is the future that this community desires. There's been projects around, for example, urban forestry that don't collaborate and engage and work with community spaces already, and it feels then that an organization or perhaps a government agency is just coming in and again prescribing that answer, saying from a technical or scientific perspective, this is what you need and here are the benefits, carbon sequestration, reducing the heat island effect, but there isn't a grounding in the social dynamics or how people engage with their spaces. So again, I think having that collaboration and oftentimes asking, what is this future we desire? Who are the people to be collaborating and talking with? And again, just coming from that framework that we're in the student role, and the people who live and reside in these communities, they're the ones who are going to be living in them and interacting with them, and oftentimes are then, whether it's perceived as an opportunity or a burden, have to care for these nature-based solutions, these green spaces, the trees that are outside their doors. And so inviting that in and making sure I don't necessarily enjoy the word ownership, but that there's some idea that this is theirs, and they want it.
Yeah, thank you. Schmidt, what's your reflections?
Yeah, first of all, thank you for this wonderful question. I think it's very intriguing, and I like to answer it in a twofold way. So firstly, I think when I see the how in tribal pastoral communities and the gate forest they relate with the landscape, the first thing that comes to my mind is this tension between egocentrism and ecocentrism, because So I was also reading a book which is based on their lives in the forest, and in the entire book, whenever they are mentioning any aspect of the ecosystem, any part or a component of the forest, they name it with the forest. So they don't, for example, identify them as separate beings from the forest, you know. So I think that was very refreshing, and uh, I think that is one of the main learnings that I took from my research. How we identify selves in as compared to nature. I think it's uh, very different in different communities. So in order to extract some meaningful learnings from this for the environment, as you mentioned, I think it's not probably that simple. It's because the way we are born and brought up in different places, I think it affects the way we perceive the world, we identify ourselves, and the way our cosmologies and worldviews are built. So it's a very gradual process. So yeah, that was the first part. And if there's a kind of controversy when it comes to extracting meaningful things from the indigenous people. So in this IPBES, there is this biodiversity protocols in which the indigenous communities worldwide, they are encouraged to document their indigenous knowledge, which is not known to the mainstream society.
Well, we have actually, I think we're going to get kicked off here very shortly. I did actually have a question for the remaining three, because I saw a link between all of your work as well. And that's the importance of local stakeholder engagement in policymaking and practice. So I'm sorry that this is basically overrun, so you don't have a lot of time to answer this question. But do you mind, in your contexts, what is the danger of not doing local stakeholder engagement? So why is it important? And then how can we make sure that it's common practice in the context that you're working? Maybe you can start, Penny.
So I think in my context, it will be kind of like strengthening the top-down program, let's say from the government, or let's say a big donor agency, imposing on local communities, and then the program that being implemented when the funding is there will not be sustainable. So I think like another government program, or, big donor agency will come and then just repeat the cycle, but it will not create, like a sustainability, or, like continuing program for long term. I think that's one of the main danger if we're not involving the local stakeholder.
So it's a wasted effort and time.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then we keep, like running in cycles.
Yeah. Well, very interestingly, Penny, there's actually a colleague of mine has written a paper on cycles of failure in mangrove restoration work. It's a paper by my colleague Ben Thompson from Monash University. You may have come across it, but it's exactly this. It reflects exactly what you're seeing. Really interesting. So yeah, Smith, I'm really sorry you cut out, so we missed the end of your question, but I'm afraid we have to move on because we're running out of time. But I really enjoyed the beginning of your answer, so thanks. So yeah, Manisha and Jeffrosis, just your quick reflections, right, on the importance of social engagement in implementing policy and the dangers, right? What goes wrong if you don't?
Yes, so one lesson that I actually distilled from one of our presenters here, that is, I think taking local people into account is likely to improve the social feasibility of all the other projects that are being planned in the region, and also the practices that are practiced by the locals there, by the indigenous people. They are contributing to sustainable development goals and targets. So this will again be a missed opportunity, and these practices are very low cost practices, are already accepted by the locals, are highly likely to be feasible. And another thing is that the tribals in my study area, they are very socially vulnerable, socioeconomically poor. So a lot of targeted schemes by the government has to really invest in a lot of money. And here we have opportunities which are fostering positive feedbacks, which are fostering win-wins for both conservation as well as the culture and the socio-economy of the tribals there. So there are a lot of missed opportunities. There are chances if we ignore chance, and also, start many negative feedback loops. So it is important to look at the entire thing with a system, complex system perspective. So this is what I think.
Yeah, wonderful. Yeah, Francis, we're going to be kicked off in 1 minute. So
Okay.
any quick answers, please?
I think when we consider the local perspective, the society and the program organized by herself, because they know more than we are implementing the project or program.
Wonderful. So all of you, thanks so much for your time. I really enjoyed it. I really learned a lot. Really nice to learn about stuff that's going on all over the world. And yeah, thank you. If anyone wants to be in touch with anybody else from this call, yeah, please let me know, or myself. Yeah, then we can definitely sort that out for any further questions or stuff. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Nice to meet you.
Yeah, nice.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.